Hi, I'm Tim from Healthy Homemade Habits, and today I'm going to show you how to break down a whole chicken into the parts that you would normally pick up at the grocery store. This is one of the habits that we've built for ourselves that we really like doing because we can know where our chicken is coming from. We like to source an Amish chicken if that's available, or an organic free-range chicken that would have the normal chicken diet, not corn-fed or all grain or something like that, because the protein is higher quality, the fat tastes better, and we can feel a little more comfortable knowing what we're eating. It's very important to us, sourcing what we put into our bodies in a way that's going to be the healthiest, and we think this is one of them. The other reason why we like doing this is because it's cost effective. You can just spend a few minutes really and get a healthy piece of chicken for cheaper than you can get at the grocery store. You can buy a whole chicken for a lower price per pound than you can any of its individual parts. If you need a pack of 8 thighs, that's fine to buy that for a specific recipe. If you need all breasts, then maybe sometimes the time trade-off is worth it. But we like to plan ahead when we can, and when we can, I can break a chicken down in about 8 to 10 minutes or so, and we can get, like I said, that higher quality meat. We have more control, we have more knowledge of where this chicken came from, and we can make tons and tons of broth. That's the other thing. We'll have a broth video for you coming up soon. We won't go into that in too much detail on this one, but we are going to cover that. This is the most cost-effective way that we've found to consume our favorite protein, chicken. So my setup is this. I have 2 bowls, cutting board, a boning knife, a paring knife, and a carving knife just in case I need it. I usually don't, but it's nice to have all these things to the side. I like to wear gloves, and I like to have paper towels on the side so I can keep my glove hands dry and keep the knife handles dry so that things don't slip around. It's important to use a sharp blade, and it's important to have a firm grip on that blade so that you can make nice cuts through the chicken without using any force. The idea is that you don't want to use force on your cuts. You should have a knife that's sharp enough to get through without doing that. So here's our chicken, and I'll just briefly run you through the parts. So here's our legs, obviously. Here's the wings, flap flap. Here's the back, and these 2 bumps here are going to be important when we're breaking down the thighs. You can see them, they're kind of like the chicken's love handles. Here's the neck, and let's turn it around on its so we can take the parts out. These are the giblets that come with most chickens that you buy at the store. You can use these for other recipes. I'm not going to show that right now. I'm just putting them off to the side. So you want to pat your chicken down so it's nice and dry, so it doesn't move around on the cutting board. Again, the idea is to be firm but gentle and getting cuts that are nice and clean, so you have nice clean pieces of chicken and not a big mangled mess. If you're new to doing this, it's not that complicated, it's not that scary. What I'm doing here is I am stretching the skin out because there's a lot of parts of the chicken that tell you where to cut it. It's kind of crazy. It's almost like it has dotted lines to cut along. So we stretch the skin out a little bit so that we can see the joints. And the joints are where we're going to really actually do most of our knife work. The 2 rules of thumb are follow fat lines and pop through joints. And we'll show that in more detail later. Right now I'm just cutting through the skin and getting into the meat where I can see where the fat lines are. Those fat lines are going to be cut and they're going to expose the joint. Now I'm cutting the skin way up on the thigh so that I can pull it out. There's a lot of flap here that we just want to cut through. And there's a lot of little extra pieces that we can save for later. It can be useful in the broth or in schmaltz or something like that. So here when the thigh is open, you'll see that there is a pretty clear line of fat
And you'll see around where that little bump is, I'm not sure the actual name for it, I'm not a butcher, an amateur home cook. So I'm gonna just describe things visually instead of trying to use language that I'm not even sure of. So right now I'm just cutting away a little bit of that extra bit, and we're flipping it around so we can see that little lump, the little chicken love handle. And we want to cut around the top side of it so that it stays attached to the thigh, because it's actually a pretty delicious piece of meat. If you can't get the whole thing, especially on your first try, don't worry about it. It takes time, it takes practice. I'm honestly still getting used to doing this. I'm not a pro by any means. So if someone has a good tip for getting this thing all the way out, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Right now I'm cutting it down so that we can really bend this thigh out so that we can pop the joint when we need to. So looking in here, you'll see there's an obvious fat line, and we're just going to make a straight line cut along it, just very lightly hitting it with the knife until we can pop that thigh bone. And you'll see it's popped out right there, and there's a bit of cartilage. Now, we don't want that to be on our thigh, especially if we're going to keep the bone in. I'll show you how to debone it later. But there's little bits in this particular chicken that I feel like I need to scrape through because I don't want them in my meat. But I'm getting to the tendons that hold the joint together. So here I am cutting through, trying to get around that little piece of cartilage. This is a little complicated. It's usually easier than this, but all chickens are a little bit different. Just like all people are a little bit different. Not that you should be breaking people down. But once you get a cut through on a thigh, you can just kind of cut it and then pull it off. It should be pretty easy to rip if you've done it right. And you have a whole thigh with the leg attached. These are great for roasting. I like to roast them whole like this sometimes. But later I'll show you how to break them apart so you can have perfect pieces every time. Now here on this side, we're going a little quicker because you've seen what I've done already, but we're doing the same process. We're cutting through the skin, and we're finding that nice fat line. We're cutting through all the extra bits, trimming the skin off, and saving that for later because I like to make schmaltz with that. Cutting through, there's the fat line. Here we go around the love handle. Again, just using the tip of the knife, being very light, so that I can get that entire piece. Some people call it the oyster. I don't really like calling it that. Here's that fat line. And we're going to pop that out in just a second. I'm going to make sure that we're getting along the right line. And we want to make sure that that little bit is released. So I'm cutting across the skin here just so it won't hang on when I'm trying to rip this thing off. Now that popped out pretty nicely, and you'll see this one goes a little bit better than the last time. You can see those two little white tendons there. That's all you really need to get your knife through. It looked like I was cutting a lot on the last one, but there's really only two tendons that you need to get through. That one, and then you can rip off again. And that should come off pretty easily. You don't have to use much muscle on it. Again, this is probably my favorite part of the chicken. It's fatty, it's got a great amount of protein, and it's just a tastier cut than most of the white meat. This is my skin bowl. I'm going to be saving any excess skin I have to make schmaltz, and maybe I'll do a schmaltz recipe in a later video. Now that we're done with the legs, we're going to move around and we're going to remove the wings with the breasts. Again, this is super simple, super straightforward, because the breast has a very clear line of fat to follow. If you ever forget what you're doing, sometimes you're in the middle of doing something and you freeze up or whatever, you just have to follow the fat lines, follow the logic that the chicken lays out before you, and trim the tendons. That's really every single piece of this breakdown. There's a couple of spots later that you'll see are a little bit different, but we'll talk about those when we get there. So again, I like to keep my hands nice and dry, or the gloves rather, nice and dry. so that my knife doesn't slip around and I can get clean cuts. Can't iterate enough how important that is. So the wing and the breast are, like I said, they're very straightforward. There's that line of fat I was talking about, and you can really just trim along that very lightly and then trim up around the shoulder where the wing connects, and that's where the tendons are going to be in the wing joint. So let's cut the skin a little bit here to reveal that, and then we're going to cut down this line of fat. Really, you can just use that as a guide. And I'm making very light, almost no pressure cuts here, just to get a clean fillet, just to fillet the breast right off of the bone. There's really not a lot of places that the meat is clinging to the bone, as you'll see, because once we cut up around, we can just pull this off like we did with the thigh. So cutting up around the fat, it'll guide you up towards that joint, and that's where we're gonna pop the tendons off. Here we are cutting through the skin, up along that breast line. You see it's already pulling away kind of naturally. And I'm just cutting through the skin here so that we can get to that joint. That joint goes up and around, and the breast meat follows along the wishbone, but we'll talk about that in a second. We cut through some of the skin up at the top by the neck and feel around for the joint. Once we find it, which I'm going to pull away some of the breast so that we can see it better, hopefully trying to see it on the video. I do this a lot by feel, but for the purpose of demonstration and showing the video, I'm cutting a little more away than I usually would. So there's one tough area on this chicken that I wasn't expecting that I'm having to cut through. That'll happen sometimes. Just keep following the plan, follow the fat line, follow the tendons, and remember that it's more simple than it might seem at first. So to keep the skin on, we're gonna have to cut a seam down the middle of it. I'm just gonna pull the skin off for the video, and we're gonna save that for our schmaltz. A lot of people like skinless breasts. I like the skin on, I like it nice and crispy, and I like the flavor that it imparts when you render the fat out. But if you cook the chicken in schmaltz, then it kind of does both of those things. Now here's pulling the skin away. I'm gonna just keep it in my skin bowl. This is a good amount that will create a nice amount of schmaltz. I usually save up enough skin from a few chickens before I make my schmaltz, and it lasts in the fridge for a long time. Like I said, I'll probably make a video about that at another time. So now we can get a clearer view of what's going on with our breast, so I can try to demonstrate to you what we're supposed to do. There, I'm taking my boning knife and I'm kind of just hacking away at it. I really want to get a good look at it. Again, it's a lot easier when I'm not demonstrating it for a video, but I'm trying to show you what I'm looking for. So I used a paring knife there to get through to it. You'll see on the next breast that it's not as difficult as I've made it here. I was trying to get a good angle, but I popped that shoulder joint and then pulled the paring knife in to cut around it. And it's not going great for me at this time, but there are those tendons. And again, if I didn't have to pull it away to show them on the video, it would have been easier. And there I just make the decision to cut the wing off. But on the next one, I'll show you how to pull the wing and the breast off at once at the same time, because that's a lot easier to do that way. So we've cut around the bottom of this breast, and I'm just cutting a little more away because I won't have the same leverage as I do when I pull it off with the wing. There's a tendon there that I cut, and then I'll cut up the middle just a little bit, just lightly enough to get a little separation so that I can just pull this thing off. And again, it doesn't take much muscle on the knife. It doesn't take much muscle when you're pulling it. But you can really just get under there, and this one isn't as clean as it would be if I was pulling it with the wing, but hey, I'm not going to edit the video and make it look like it's nicer than it was. Sometimes it goes this way, and that's okay. The chicken's still edible. So cutting away from it because my pull didn't go as clean as I wanted to, but this is a great time to demonstrate that the wishbone is right there. And you pull it away from the wishbone and you can have a very nice, you know, £1.5 chicken breast, maybe a pound, I don't know. There's a little cartilage on this one that I'm going to want to cut away. A couple of bits that are a little red that, you know, they're edible, but we can cut those away later. Underneath the breast, well, I had a little extra meat. My tear wasn't super clean, but that's a perfectly good piece of chicken to fry up. So we'll keep that to the side and we'll put it with the tenderloins. This is the tenderloin that sits underneath the breast. There's a little piece that we're going to rip out of it, and that little piece is actually what we're going to use to pull it away. You, again, just have to make a little cut on the bottom and on the top, and it's almost in a little like pocket. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's in a little like pocket that you just kind of pull it out from. Sometimes the pull is clean, sometimes it rips. I'm still getting used to it. I'm still getting better at it every time. I'm not a professional by any means, but that's okay. You know, if you cut it up into pieces, it still fries up and it tastes like chicken. So what more can you ask for there? So here I am pulling this one away. I think the next one goes a little nicer. But here's a full-on tenderloin. These are very expensive at the store to buy like 8 to 10 of them. I think they're sell them like $4 a pound or something like that, $5 a pound, something like that. And it's one of the most highly regarded pieces of the chicken. People really love these. I'm going to cut this little cartilage bit out, but there's a trick to get it out with a fork that I didn't do for this video. Again, maybe I'll show it in another one. Comment below if you want to see anything, you know, in more detail, or if you'd like me to go and talk about any other parts of this process. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'd love to make, you know, more useful educational content for you. So I grabbed that little piece, we're putting it together with that tenderloin, and we're going to keep that to the side in our bowl with all of our parts. There's that little piece of cartilage, I just threw it away. I guess you could put it in the stock, but it won't do much for you. So here is the other breast, and we're going to do this one a lot cleaner. I'm not going to worry about showing you, you know, the line of or where the cartilage is. We're just going to pop that wing out. And then we're going to cut around the fat line right there, just like I showed you before. Nice and easy, nice and gentle. Nice sharp knife. Comment below if you want to see a knife sharpening video. I find the process of sharpening your own knives very satisfying. There's a number of services that'll do it for you professionally for a pretty decent price too. So this time I followed the fat line all the way up around the shoulder. And this is the more straightforward, cleaner way to do it. We get into the joint there, and we can just cut through a couple of those tiny little tendons, and then I'll make a little incision right around that central bit, the breastbone, and then we can just pull that away once we've separated that wing from the shoulder. And you'll see me do that in a pretty clean motion after we've cut along the breastbone again, or sorry, the wishbone. I meant to say cut along the wishbone again. Here's the last tendon that we need to pop. And then once I get around all of them, I can pull this thing away in one easy tear. And that's going to give you a nice, clean chicken breast, like a very solid one, like one you would buy at the store. To separate the wing, we cut on the breast side of the bone, trying not to get any of the cartilage or bone. And then we have a full wing there, ready to go, ready to break down. and a full breast like we did before, but this one was a lot easier because I did it, the right way. Again, underneath that guy is a tenderloin, and if you're like me, you love fried chicken, and I love frying the tenderloins. It's one of my favorite pieces of bread. Make a proper chicken tender and serve it alongside some cauliflower mash or mashed potatoes or even macaroni and cheese is a truly divine experience here on earth. So I'm cutting around the bottom here, separating the tenderloin, and then just in one pull, we can rip that right out. Again, sometimes it rips, sometimes it doesn't, and then sometimes you can just cut that guy off, discard it, and you have a tenderloin. If there's any meat that you want to keep, you can always tear that off of the body, but here are the bones that we're going to use for broth, and we're definitely going to make a broth video coming up soon, because that's how you make your chicken free, basically. I joke around that chicken is free. I know it's not technically free, but it can definitely pay for itself in the amount of things that you can get out of it by breaking it down, instead of buying several breasts or several thighs or whatever at once, which again is perfectly fine to do depending on your recipes. But if you're building habits of longevity and you are trying to, pinch every penny you can, this is a great way to save money. So I'm just wrapping this in parchment paper, and I'll be putting it in a bag that I have here with my other bones. I like to do 2 chickens per stock because I just really love the richness that it offers, but I've done bone broth with a single chicken and it's been fine. It's been great. Much better than anything you get at the store. Here I'm putting my skin in my skin for schmaltz bag, and those are both going to just go in the freezer. I'm grabbing my breasts out of the bowl, keeping them to the side because they'll go in a breast bag. Keeping the tenderloins to the side, they'll go in their own bag. And now let's break the wing down. The wing's really easy. We cut through both the joints, right? So there's a line there through the skin, and here's a line here through that little tiny wing tip. We just cut down in a V shape, through the joints. And if you meet any kind of resistance, just shift to the left or right. It sometimes helps to kind of pop the joint out, and it's just like the others where there's a ball meeting a cap and there's 2 tendons inside of that are actually holding it together. So there it is. We've chopped the drumette off, and now we'll get the flat, and I like both parts of the chicken wing. I was never really a chicken wing person until I started making my own. Here's the tip. I'm going to put that with my bones that I keep for my broth because the fat on that skin just adds to the broth's nice richness. Here's the drumette. Here's the flat, and they go in their own wings bag. Here I'm starting a new one because I just made some. Maybe I'll do a wings recipe. Comment below if you want to see a wings recipe. So here I'm just separating the other one, and it's nice and easy when you get to know what you're doing. I've been told that if you're uncomfortable practicing on a raw chicken, one of the ways you can get comfortable with this is to buy a rotisserie chicken from the store and practice on that. But I just think using a raw chicken is the best way to learn anyway. So here is my leg and thigh combo. Again, these are perfectly fine to roast up on their own, but in our house we separate them and it just makes that many more meals for us. You want to cut on the leg side of the fat line. And it's, again, a nice, gentle cut. If you start meeting any kind of resistance whatsoever, shift your knife position and you should be able to cut right through. And, ooh, need to sharpen my knife. Not getting through that skin in one swipe. Okay, there is my drum. Here's my thigh with the skin on. Again, the skin, one of my favorite parts. Gets nice and crispy. Takes seasoning well. We could remove skin from both these and add it to our schmaltz, and that would be fine, but we're going to keep the skin on for that delicious dinner later down the road. Here's my second one. Again, leg side of the fat line, cut through the joint, just like we did all the other joints. It should be very easy. You should use no muscle at all. See, these cartilage bits, they get a little scraped sometimes, and you want to just make sure to get those little bone pieces out. I said cartilage bits, I meant bone pieces. You want to make sure to get those bone pieces out before you feed them, especially to a kid or something, because they don't have the discernment yet to not, swallow that or choke on it. And we don't want that to happen. So we're going to debone this thigh, and it's not as clear, but it's pretty straightforward. You just run your knife along the bone on one side, and then there's almost like a rolling motion, not a constant roll, just a slight, you cut and then you roll the bone, and then you cut and you roll the bone. And I'm using the paring knife here to get underneath that little fatty bit to really separate it from the bone. And we're being very light, very gentle with the knife, and we're just removing that bone from the thigh, just cutting along as close to the bone as we can so we lose as little meat as possible. Always cutting in a safe direction. That's not gonna, lop off a fingertip or something. Nobody wants a trip to the hospital just over a chicken thigh. So we're cutting along the side of the bone again, and cutting through any kind of tougher bits. Those are usually caused by fat, maybe a tendon or cartilage. Again, not a biologist. I don't know all the actual names of the parts, just a guy who loves chicken. So you can cut underneath and through the bone once you get enough away from it, and the bone should separate pretty easily. And we want to remove as much of that cartilage from the cookable part of the thigh that we want. Again, there's probably a better technique for this that is a professional technique. I'm trying to show, demonstrate how to get close to the bone. I usually do this in a lot faster time. I can break a chicken down in about, I think it takes me about 8 to 10 minutes now, and I'm getting faster all the time. So here is a little bit that we had left over from when we cut the leg off, and I just remove that, toss it with the trash, put that bone in with the broth, and we have a skin-on, beautiful chicken thigh. I like to pack these flat in the bag in the freezer so that they all defrost if I need to do a quick thaw on them. But if you're gonna plan ahead and you put them in the fridge overnight, they should thaw out pretty nicely by the time you're ready for dinner the next day. So this is sped up, but we're doing that same thing. We're cutting close to the bone, rolling the bone over, cutting close to the bone, rolling the bone over, and then cutting through any, bits in the bottom. That's the quickest way to get all that bone away from the thigh. Okay, 2 bones with a little tiny bit of meat on them. 2 boneless chicken thighs, one of my favorite dinners. Comment below if you want to see a recipe for chicken thighs. I'm sure we'll make one whether you ask for it or not. And these bones are going to go in the broth. Thighs are going to go in the bag. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. We're glad you made it this far. And subscribe to find out what we're cooking up next. We've got a lot of recipes and budgeting tips and things coming your way. We're going to have tips for cleaning efficiently, saving yourself time by doing a little more up front, and how you can find joy in taking your time building a healthy and happy life.